He was America's favorite son. Polite, gentle, trustworthy. The kind of boy millions of families welcomed into their living rooms every week without hesitation. And as he grew older, he became something even rarer, one of the most respected directors in Hollywood. Calm under pressure, gracious in success, humble in victory. For decades, Ron Howard carried a reputation almost no one questioned. But behind the warmth, behind the smile, behind the legacy, there were wounds, there were disappointments, and there were people he never forgot. Some of those memories began when he was just 6 years old. Others came much later, when he was already one of the most powerful storytellers in the world. And together, they revealed a truth that few ever saw: the quiet heartbreak of Hollywood's nicest man. The world that raised him. Long before the awards, before the red carpets, and before he ever stepped behind a camera, Ron Howard was simply Opie, a small boy growing up in the peaceful, fictional town of Mayberry. That town lived inside one of the most beloved television series in history, The Andy Griffith Show. Premiering in 1960, the show didn't rely on explosions or shocking twists. It offered something far simpler and far more powerful: kindness, honesty, human connection. At its center was Sheriff Andy Taylor, played by Andy Griffith. He wasn't the kind of lawman audiences were used to seeing. He didn't bark orders or carry himself with intimidation. He led with patience, with empathy, with quiet strength. And beside him was his young son, Opie. Played by Ron Howard, Opie wasn't just a character. He became a symbol of innocence, curiosity, and hope. Audiences watched him grow. They watched him learn life lessons. They watched him make mistakes and find his way again. It felt real, because in many ways it was. The cast spent years together, laughing between takes, sharing meals, watching one another grow older. Don Knotts brought unforgettable humor as Barney Fife, the nervous but lovable deputy whose antics never failed to bring laughter. And in the Taylor household was Aunt Bee, portrayed by Frances Bavier, the gentle caretaker who completed the illusion of a perfect family. To the audience, they were more than actors. They were home. But off-camera, things were more complicated than anyone realized. The woman who stayed apart. Frances Bavier gave millions of viewers comfort as Aunt Bee. She represented warmth, stability, and unconditional love. But behind the scenes, she was very different. She was private, serious, reserved. While others joked and relaxed between scenes, Bavier remained focused, professional, distant. She wasn't unkind, but she wasn't affectionate either, especially with young Ron. At an age when most child actors needed reassurance, encouragement, and warmth, he instead encountered something colder, something quieter, something harder to understand. There was one moment he never forgot. It happened during the filming of an episode involving Aunt Bee's homemade pickles. In the story, Opie was supposed to eat them. The joke was that they tasted terrible. But what viewers didn't know was that Ron Howard truly hated pickles. Each take required him to bite into them again, and again, and again. He forced himself to smile, to perform, to stay professional. But inside, he was miserable. Standing across from him was Frances Bavier. Watching, unsmiling, detached. She wasn't cruel. She didn't yell. She didn't insult him. But she didn't comfort him either. And for a small boy navigating the confusing world of television, that absence of warmth left an impression deeper than anyone realized. He did his job. He always did. But the emotional distance stayed with him. Years later, he would remember not anger, but sadness. Because sometimes the deepest wounds aren't caused by what people do. They're caused by what they don't do. The illusion of family. To viewers, the cast of the Andy Griffith Show seemed inseparable. Their chemistry felt effortless. Their affection felt real. But Frances Bavier never quite became part of the family the way others did. She kept to herself. She avoided social gatherings. She rarely formed close friendships with her co-stars. And over time, the emotional gap widened. Even Andy Griffith himself eventually acknowledged that their relationship had been strained. Not openly, not dramatically, but quietly. Respectfully, years after the show ended, something unexpected happened. Frances Bavier called Andy Griffith. She apologized. She admitted she had been difficult. She expressed regret. It was a moment of honesty that arrived late, but not too late. Andy accepted her apology. And just like that, a chapter that had remained emotionally unfinished for years finally found peace. Frances Bavier would pass away in 1989. Her legacy forever tied to the warmth she portrayed, even if she struggled to feel it herself. For Ron Howard, the experience became part of something larger. A lesson, one that would shape how he treated others for the rest of his life. Growing beyond Opie, for many child actors, fame becomes a prison. They grow up trapped inside the characters people refuse to let them outgrow. But Ron Howard was different. He had something rare. Perspective. Born into a family of actors, he understood the industry from an early age. He saw the hard work, the discipline, the unpredictability, and he developed something even more important. Curiosity. He didn't just want to act. He wanted to understand storytelling itself. After the Andy Griffith Show ended, he found new success starring in the hit sitcom Happy Days. As Richie Cunningham, he once again became America's relatable young man. But behind the scenes, his attention was shifting. He watched directors closely. He studied their decisions. He paid attention to how stories came together. Because, deep down, he knew acting wasn't his final destination. Directing was. His transition wasn't instant. It required patience, risk, and belief. But eventually he stepped behind the camera, and everything changed, becoming one of Hollywood's greatest directors. Ron Howard didn't just become a director. He became one of the most respected directors of his generation. His films weren't built on shock value or controversy. They were built on emotion, human struggle, and truth. One of his greatest achievements came with A Beautiful Mind. The story of mathematician John Nash captivated audiences around the world. It was vulnerable, powerful, unforgettable, and it earned Ron Howard the Academy Award for Best Director. It was a moment that completed one of the most remarkable transformations in entertainment history. From child star to serious actor to Oscar-winning director. He had done what few ever managed. He had reinvented himself completely. But success didn't protect him from disappointment. Because disappointment doesn't care about awards. The love that kept him grounded. In an industry where relationships often collapse under pressure, Ron Howard found something rare. Stability. He found it in Cheryl Howard. They met as teenagers, long before the awards, long before the fame reached its peak. She didn't fall in love with a celebrity. She fell in love with a person. They married in 1975, and they stayed together. Through every career shift, through every success, through every uncertainty, she became his anchor, his constant. Their daughter, Bryce Dallas Howard, would later describe their relationship as deeply balanced, built on mutual respect, trust, and friendship. For Ron Howard, Cheryl represented something essential: normalcy, perspective, home. And that stability helped him navigate the storms that inevitably came with fame. When success meets controversy, even the most respected careers encounter resistance. In 2006, Ron Howard directed The Da Vinci Code, based on the controversial best-selling novel. The film sparked global debate. Religious organizations criticized it. Some demanded warnings or disclaimers. Others called it offensive. But Ron Howard didn't respond with anger. He responded with calm. He defended his work as fiction, as storytelling, as art. He refused to escalate the conflict because he understood something many never learn. Not every criticism requires a fight. Sometimes dignity is the most powerful response. A new kind of disappointment. For most of his career, Ron Howard avoided personal controversy. He stayed focused on storytelling. He stayed focused on people. But one project would bring him an unexpected emotional challenge. It began with a memoir, Hillbilly Elegy, written by J.D. Vance. The book told a deeply personal story of struggle, hardship, and survival. Ron Howard saw humanity in it. He saw pain. He saw resilience. He saw truth. He decided to direct the film adaptation. At the time, J.D. Vance wasn't a political figure. He was simply a writer, a storyteller, someone whose life represented perseverance. Ron Howard approached the project with sincerity, with empathy, with respect. But after the film's release, something changed. J.D. Vance entered politics. His public voice shifted. His message evolved. And Ron Howard found himself watching someone he thought he understood become someone unfamiliar. It wasn't anger he felt. It was disappointment. Quiet, personal, lasting. He had invested himself in telling this man's story, and now he no longer recognized the person at its center. It was a different kind of heartbreak. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. The lessons that stayed with him. Looking back across his life, Ron Howard didn't focus on bitterness. He focused on understanding. He understood that people are complicated. That kindness isn't always guaranteed. That admiration doesn't always last. He remembered the emotional distance he felt as a child working beside Francis Bavier. He remembered the disappointment he felt later in life, watching someone he believed in change. But he didn't let those experiences harden him. They made him wiser. They taught him to value authenticity. They taught him to recognize sincerity. They taught him that character matters more than reputation. Because reputation can be manufactured. Character cannot. The legacy of Hollywood's nicest man. Today, Ron Howard stands as something rare. Not just a successful filmmaker, but a respected human being. He never chased scandal. He never relied on controversy. He built his career on consistency, integrity, and quiet strength. From the peaceful streets of Mayberry to the grand stage of the Academy Awards, his journey remains one of the most extraordinary in entertainment history. But behind every achievement, behind every success, behind every smile were moments of pain, moments of disappointment, moments that shaped the man he became. He didn't allow those moments to define him. He allowed them to teach him. And in doing so, he became more than a star, more than a director. He became something far more enduring, a storyteller who understood the truth about people, not the versions they show the world, but the versions they reveal when no one is watching. And perhaps that's why his stories continue to resonate, because they come from a place few ever see, a place shaped by kindness, tested by disappointment, and strengthened by wisdom.